Over a decade ago, on her now inactive Tumblr page, a then 24-year-old Rebecca Sugar posted a drawing to promote an upcoming Adventure Time episode they worked on. In it, they drew themselves weeping passionately, ukulele in hand, as her collaborator, Adam Mudo, looked on in what I could only describe as shock and concern. Despite their meekness in public, Rebecca Sugar has imbued their work with an almost unconscionable amount of sincerity and emotion from the beginning. It's evident from her student thesis film, Singles, which is not only an inventive piece of animation, but a deeply affecting depiction of loneliness and dissociation. It's evident in her comic Don't Cry For Me, I'm Already Dead, a tragic story about the power of art to connect to people, even in terrible circumstances. It's evident in her first published comic, Pug Davis, a parody of her major influences at the time, like Mike Mignola's Hellboy and Eric Powell's The Goon, that, at its core, is about alienation and the need for intimate, interpersonal connection. These initial experiments foreshadowed the types of stories Sugar would become famous for. Stories set in fantastical worlds with cartoonish characters that, beneath their outlandish exterior, possessed a core of hope, regret, fear, and longing. I would say that there are 3 essential principles that define Sugar's body of work. This is a bit arbitrary because there's a lot of different things that define their work, but let's just say 3 principles: economic writing, tonal whiplash, and emotional honesty. All 3 aforementioned stories possess these qualities. They're all incredibly short, yet they manage to evoke strong feelings because they're efficient in their storytelling. No moment lingers longer than it needs to, and I would say the only big downside to her early work is that there's not enough time to spend with these characters and these worlds that she's created. All 3 stories also have a degree of silliness that contrasts with the drama. Singles, in between its existential imagery, is about a guy making a sandwich. Most of the dialogue in Don't Cry is Simpsons quotes, and Pug Davis is about a guy with a pug for a face. Rebecca Sugar is not afraid of being silly or outright comical because those are necessary aspects of the human experience and of the artistic process itself. Sugar can't help but remind the audience that art is illusory.
There's something really special about animation. It's an optical illusion, and so you really have to project humanity onto it, and that's got to come from you.
Yeah.
I think that's why it can be so polarizing, because it's a very vulnerable thing to do as an adult, to say, like, I'm going to believe in this thing I know isn't real. I'm going to see myself in these drawings that are just drawings.
And that, on its face, is a bit silly. Their work often has this type of fourth wall break, but these moments aren't designed to take you out of the story. They're designed to draw you in by reminding you how miraculous it all is. All of her stories are also, in one way or another, outlets for Rebecca to let out her feelings, with Pug perhaps being the most direct illustration of this. These core aspects of her work would only get refined as they began their animation career with Cartoon Network. My first exposure to Rebecca Sugar was through her work on Adventure Time, as I assume is the case for most people. She quickly gained a reputation in the Adventure Time community not just for her writing of Marceline, which was massively influential on her subsequent characterization, but also for her music, which would become a unique hallmark of her work. Music is essential to the identity of Adventure Time, so much so that when creator Pendleton Ward initially pitched it to Cartoon Network, he began the pitch by singing the theme song.
Penn heard that we were taking pitches, and he came up with a pitch for Adventure Time. So I walk in the room. Here is this guy with this big beard, and he's standing there with a guitar. All of a sudden, he starts singing what turned out to now be the ukulele opening of Adventure Time.
That is great.
And he sang that and put the guitar down before he started telling us anything about the cartoon.
Which isn't exactly the industry standard. Sugar would have to do the same when pitching her own songs, often asking the crew to look in the other direction as she did, out of embarrassment. Despite Sugar's current renown as a musician, music was not her initial mode of creativity. Yet on her first full episode as a storyboard artist, she wrote a song that would set the tone for the rest of her career.
Boom,
Fries, better known to me by its unofficial name, Fry Song, is the first song Sugar wrote for Adventure Time. Marceline introduces the song by saying,
"Now, I'm gonna sing something really personal, so don't laugh at me,"
which is immediately subverted by the incredibly petty first line.
Daddy, why did you eat my fries? I bought them, and they were mine.
The song seems to be as simple as that initial setup and punchline, yet in just a few lines, it manages to use that premise to convey the impact of parental neglect.
Daddy, do you even love me? Well, I wish you would show it, because I wouldn't know it.
Season 2 of Adventure Time was really the first time the show made efforts to be not just a wacky episodic kids cartoon, but a full-blown post-apocalyptic coming-of-age drama that occasionally dropped tactical nuclear strikes of emotion in between the fart jokes and cringy neologisms.
JJ Flip! What the zip?
And I think a lot of that shift is due in part to Sugar's contributions. Some of the most intimate and emotionally resonant episodes of season 2 through 5, like Simon and Marcy, I Remember You, What Was Missing, Burning Low, were co-boarded by Sugar. That being said, I do want to highlight how important the contributions of her peers and superiors were in fostering her artistic development. Discussions around creators can often lean into auteur theory in a way that I think wrongly downplays the inherently collaborative nature of all art, especially animation. Sugar has always been very open about the collaborative nature of her art, so I'd like to talk about her often overlooked mentors and peers that offered guidance and support throughout her career. Phil Renda was the lead character designer during the initial seasons of Adventure Time, and he is largely responsible for getting Rebecca hired.
I had seen the Adventure Time pilot. I was hearing about it ramping up into a show. I loosely knew the character designer Phil Renda on the show, and he had come to speak at SVA because he was a graduate. And then when he came to speak, I went over and I gave him some of my comics. I was still doing comics. I think they ended up at the studio here because I had given them to him, and then I also kept in touch with him while I was working on my student film. So then when they were testing for storyboards for Adventure Time, because they needed new storyboarders, he got in touch with me and sent me a test. I did this test, I sent it in, I didn't hear anything for a little bit. So I went to SPX, and Penn was there.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know what was going on. I think I actually went up to him and asked, oh, did you ever get my test? Which was pretty forward. I maybe shouldn't have done that. But he sort of said yes, and I think a little bit after that, I heard back that they were interested in hiring me as a revisionist.
Renda himself has worked on Gravity Falls, The Venture Bros, Chowder, and a bunch of other cool projects. While he may not have the public notoriety of the big-name showrunners, he's one of many individuals who keep the machine of animation churning quietly in the background. Outside of her immediate family, Ian Jones-Cordy is likely Rebecca's longest and most influential collaborator. They met in her freshman year at SVA and have been working together ever since. He helped her with her student film, she helped him with his web cartoon Knock Force, she referred him to work on Adventure Time, they both worked on Steven Universe, and now they're working on a Steven Universe spin-off and a 3-act Adult Swim special called The Elephant. Her work would simply not be the same without Ian's assistance and unyielding support. Ian himself is responsible for creating the incredibly underrated OKKO Let's Be Heroes, which will always hold a special place in my heart. Him and Rebecca may be the single greatest couple in animation history, second only to Craig McCracken and Lauren Faust. Jeff Ball is an incredible violinist, producer, musician, and visual artist, best known for his invaluable contributions to the Steven Universe soundtrack alongside composers Aivi and Surasshu. If a track features a violin, it's probably Jeff playing. He's one of many Steven Universe alumni who helped Sugar on their personal albums, with his production and beautiful string arrangements defining the warm soundscape of those records. Aivi and Surasshu, who, like Ian and Rebecca, are a married art duo, also co-produced Sugar's first 2 albums and are both incredibly talented in their own right. Aivi and Surasshu have released 2 original collaborative albums, albums, several soundtrack albums, and a few solo albums that are all amazing. All three of them were as invaluable as Rebecca in defining the musical identity of Steven Universe and encouraging her musical endeavors. Fun fact, if it wasn't for Aivi and Surasshu, Rebecca wouldn't have sung Love Like You.
I was pretty shy about my voice. The composers, Steven and Aivi, the composers for Steven Universe, are the ones who talked me into singing for the end credits song, and I'm really grateful that they did, because I never would have done that if someone hadn't asked me to.
Yeah.
And that's just not a universe I want to live in. On the Adventure Time team, there were three key figures that helped young Rebecca. Adam Muto, her storyboard partner and the eventual showrunner of Adventure Time, Pendleton Ward, the creator, and Patrick McHale, the creative director and eventual creator of Over the Garden Wall. Ward and McHale, as Sugar's superiors, fostered an environment that was conducive to Rebecca's ideas. They encouraged her to put herself into the characters and to really sell her story ideas. Ward also specifically helped direct them on how to make Fry's song balance tone in a way that fit Adventure Time's brand of tragic comedy. Sugar established a great rapport with Adam Muto early on, and it's clear hearing them speak about each other how much mutual respect they both have. In totality, the Adventure Time crew offered a blueprint for how supportive a team could be, and how everyone can be given a chance to offer their own unique perspective and create a really earnest final product. This approach is something she would carry into Steven Universe. Steven Universe is such an emotionally charged show. Its ability to evoke feelings across the emotional spectrum, from fear to delight to annoyance to hope and everything in between, is simply incomparable. I think even if you hate the show, you've gotta admit, it's got heart. The show's music is a great microcosm of this. Peace and Love is funny and hopeful, Stronger Than You is badass and invigorating, Other Friends is a funky-ass Disney villain song, Here Comes the Thought is meditative and bittersweet, Ruby Rider is stupid and lovely, and that's just talking about the songs with lyrics. The channel Sideway made a great video about the show's instrumentation that I really recommend if you're interested, but I also want to go into a little bit of the theory, the music theory, behind why Rebecca's music is so evocative. Also, this is just a nice excuse to remind everyone that I'm a musician, a mediocre one, but one nonetheless. Rebecca is one of my biggest inspirations and the reason I decided to learn ukulele. So, let's talk music. Music, much like storytelling, is all about tension and release, setting up conflict or intrigue, and then resolving it. Rebecca plays with this in a few fun ways. Often, they use a lot of seventh chords in their tracks. A seventh chord is just a triad, 3 notes played at once, with an extra note at the top that's a seventh above the root. If you don't know what that means, that's okay. What's relevant to this discussion is how they make us feel. Major seventh chords tend to have this uplifting, jazzy quality to them. A great example of this is Love Like You and Time Adventure, which are both almost entirely composed of seventh chords. Dominant seventh chords feel tense and unresolved. Dominant sevenths are usually transitory chords designed to resolve to the root chord. Be Wherever You Are is a good example of this. Isn't this such a beautiful night? Whoa, we're underneath 1,000 shining stars. Another common feature of their writing is plagal cadences, which involve going from the 4 chord to the 1 chord. Again, you don't need to understand the mechanics, just their effect. A major plagal cadence sounds sort of grand and regal, while a minor plagal cadence is reflective and wistful. One of the more famous uses of the minor plagal cadence is Radiohead's No Surprises. I Remember You is a great example from Sugar's work that uses both major and minor plagal cadences in conjunction with each other. For any Will Wood fans in the audience, you may recognize these principles in Skeleton Appreciation Day, which also shares its chord progression with Radiohead's Creep, David Bowie's Space Odyssey, and Better Than Me by the Brobecks. I have good music taste, please have sex with me. all of those songs also use major third chords in their progressions, which is also very prevalent in Rebecca's music.
When I was writing the Steven Universe theme song, I knew I had to use my absolute favorite chord progression and my absolute favorite kind of chord, which is the major 3 chord. That's the chord that sounds like this. We are the crystal gems. 1, major 3.
My main point is just that the music is as evocative as the storytelling. One of the core aspects of Rebecca's style that's a bit trickier to describe objectively is the emotional honesty. I don't think it's fair to just pluck quotes from interviews with Rebecca talking about how her life inspired her work, because it's not that simple. You don't need to know the context of Sugar's life to understand that the emotions of her characters are coming from a real place. She is willing to be messy and uncomfortable and weird in a way that almost feels invasive as an audience member. I think that's why her writing for Marceline struck a chord with so many people. Before her, Marceline was just a cool trickster with a weak moral compass, but Rebecca revealed how flimsy that exterior was, how much of her gremlin energy, for lack of a better term, was concealing a lot of pain. There's a lot of good criticisms to be made about Steven Universe, but I don't think you could ever claim the show as being disingenuous. There are so many scenes and even individual lines from the show that still emotionally devastate me in a way that I can't really articulate. Rebecca's most recent solo music release, Lonely Magic, feels like the culmination of all these core principles that I've been talking about. Like their previous album, it's fairly short, lasting less than 20 minutes with only 7 tracks that vary drastically in tone and even genre, oscillating from theatrical chamber pop to low-key bossa nova to pop punk. As expected, it's also really personal in a way that Rebecca has been very open about. Fellow essayist Maru Maru made a great video doing a really thorough analysis of the album's overarching narrative that I really recommend if that stuff interests you. It's really cathartic, for me specifically, to look at the credits of the album and the music videos and to spot so many familiar names. Almost everyone involved in the production of the album is a connection Sugar made through her work at Cartoon Network. Aivi and Surasshu, Jeff Ball, and Steamage all worked on the music of Steven. Toby Jones, the director of the Hill to Die On music video, is a fellow Cartoon Network creator, and the incredibly talented animator Takafumi Hori, who has worked on all of the animation for Spiral Bound and Lonely Magic, helped create some of the most stunning moments from Mindful Education and Steven Universe the movie. This was all intentional. As Sugar has said in interviews after the release,
I mean, this album is so much about the experience of making the show. And so I decided to try to approach it the way I approached the show. And then the other thing was I partnered with more producers and musicians. It's about the show. And so it was also people from the show, and they knew what I was talking about. They remembered, these times. Really, the conclusion I came to, as I was finishing the whole record, is that that's what it's all about, the people and just the joy of making art with other artists and being inspired by other artists.
And the great thing about the way Rebecca writes lyrics is that the specificity is designed to communicate feeling more than it is literal events. You don't need to know that Ice Water is about the start of her relationship with Ian and being in art school. You can feel the joy in the strings and harmonies and beautiful piano arpeggios. You can almost hear her smiling as she sings it. We can intuitively understand the feeling of being so consumed by glee or obsession that you don't notice the passing of time or the ice water in your shoes. I don't know who or what inspired This Is a Love Song, but I feel the anger, I feel the sass, and I can fill in the dots based on my understanding of her life, but also with my own experiences. The song gets to be this vessel for both Rebecca and the audience. A shared dream. It's like they're saying, I feel this way, and how do you feel? Their work doesn't end with a full stop. It ends with a space for the audience. And that just makes it so endlessly compelling. I think being an artist is, in some part, realizing you have this crazy need to say something and feeling like the only way for it to make sense is adding layers of abstraction and poetry and metaphor. Sometimes the best way to explain how you feel is to say what it is like. It feels like there's a fire in my body, but I can't put it in any more literal terms. Being an artist is like being a character in a musical. When your emotions reach a breaking point, you just have to sing or draw or write or dance because that's the only thing that makes sense. And that sticks with you. It becomes part of how we interact with the world and other people. One of the ways I connected with one of my best friends was through our mutual love of Steven Universe. And so much of our communication is filtered through this common understanding of the show. The show has become essential to our friendship, and it's essential to my own taste and my music and, of course, my essays. This is not unique to Rebecca Sugar. All art impacts us in some way. But she's one of the few artists I know of that really understands that power and integrates it so fundamentally into their work. More than a lot of other artists, their work is a looking glass, and I can't wait to see what lies in the reflection years down the line. Again,
Singing with the angel chorus. I don't care what happens to me. I just want art and music and you. Ice water spilling into my shoes. I'm skipping home from Union Square. I don't care what happens to me. I just want art and music and you. Ice water spilling into my shoes. I'm skipping home from Union Square. I don't care what happens to me. I just want art and beauty and truth. The dawn is breaking.